Whenever you're not feeling confident in yourself, just try to summon all the courage of somebody on TikTok who has no idea what they're talking about.
Right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Like, I mean, like,
and then just wing the whole thing.
Yeah,
and,
just wing
and
it. Yeah.
you'll get some hits and some followers, and
Yeah.
maybe start a cult or a religion. I don't know. You want to go traumatic or happy? He just kind of like flops down in there, like collapsing. Like fight or flight obviously set in, and I did what I had to do. I guess it didn't really hit me until like a little bit later that day. Parameters of the first year were you can't have a job, you can't have a girlfriend, no romance whatsoever. If I were to sign that lease, it was going to be the biggest mistake of my life. Yeah, I mean, I it couldn't have been any more clear at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, just, okay, God, I believe you now.
What are probably the top 2 or 3 most important things in an employee that you would want as somebody who owns your own business? But when was the last time you cried?
Like a second ago. I almost lost it there in the very beginning. Just a totally different universe was opened up to me.
And then what happens next?
That's really annoying. People just like half-wittedly go ahead and answer that question, and
Yeah.
they just pull it out of their back pocket and they don't actually know what they're talking about. They have no research done or anything, just more or less an idea that came to their mind and what seems accurate to them.
Maybe here's an interesting thought. Whenever you're not feeling confident in yourself, just try to summon all the courage of somebody on TikTok who has no idea what they're talking about.
Right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Like,
and then just wing the whole thing.
Yeah, just wing it. Yeah.
You'll get some hits and some followers, and maybe start a cult or a religion. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, but it's interesting when you come to stuff like that. Like, there's so much information that's out there, good information. Within Christianity, you have like apologetics, and if you really want to know what the Bible says about something, obviously you can go to the source material, go to the text. But there are people who have, within Christianity, we've got 2,000 years. And if you tack on Judaism, too, which is, Christianity comes out of Judaism, we have thousands and thousands of years of people wrestling with God, wrestling with the ideas that God has spoken, and trying to figure out what this means and what it means, how do you even apply this. So whether it's a slavery thing or whether it's with the last episode, me and Aaron, we talked about a little bit about women in the church, just because that was related to the IBLP with the Duggars and all of that. We talked a little bit about that, and whatever it is, there are good answers, but the quick summary conclusion of one of the core bits of our last podcast episode was just be clear over whether you're talking about something that is obvious in Scripture or it's your conclusion. Have your conclusions. That's fine. Like, when you put 2 and 2 together, be honest that 4 is my answer of 2 and 2. Because so many times I've heard somebody say, well, this is clear in the Bible. It clearly says this. If you look at the text, it actually says these words. But then when you look at the context, like the chapter that's in, does the chapter even talk about that? Like, the verse is there, but does the chapter support this idea?
Yeah. Is that really the meaning behind those words?
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. But so many times I've heard somebody say it's clearly in the Bible, and I went to check it out, and it is not that clear. And so, again, it's just be honest about your conclusions. If you come to the conclusion that, well, anyways, if you think that something is wrong or a sin, say, look, we're not going to do blank because we think it's a sin.
Well, even like Saul also called Paul, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a big one. That's a huge one. Common misconception still to this day. And I think now it's finally gaining traction of what the truth behind that whole thing is. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of people are like, oh, it just says it in the Bible, clear as day. And it's like, actually, it doesn't say a thing about that. Like, I remember like, I was in a Sunday school at, my old church, and the pastor had said that, and it was a small congregation, so I just was like, actually, that's not true. And everyone looked back at me like they were ready to kill me. Like, what did you just say? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, no, it says it in the Bible. Yeah, but Jesus gave him that name. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't. Nope. And I told them, what it actually meant, yada yada. And my pastor, being good, honest, truth-seeking man that he was, he looked right there while they were still teaching the lesson. His wife kind of took over from there, and he looked it up, and he's like, Saul, also called Paul. And he was like, okay, never mind. I stand corrected. And I was
yeah, props to him. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That is having that humility is a big deal.
he did it right in front of the whole congregation,
Hey,
which
and that's
it wasn't that many people, but nonetheless, yeah.
yeah, willing to at least double check.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And for no reason whatsoever, that reminds me. Welcome to another episode of Charting Life. I'm your host, Matt, and Aaron's not here today. He's going off doing other things, improving his life and making things good, but he will be back. Don't worry, if you prefer Aaron instead of me, that's okay. Again, he's going to come back at some point. So I do not bore you to death. I have a good friend here, Andrew. Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you? What's going on? And anything interesting.
Yeah, so like Matt said, my name is Andrew. I'm 34 years old. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, born and raised. Never moved anywhere unless it was, for a little bit of time, like a season or two.
Yeah, you lived. We'll talk about it in a minute, I think. But you lived in Florida for a with me. That was an adventure.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Yeah.
Yep.
And since you're giving other details, what's your social security number? I'm kidding. don't even pretend.
I don't care. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, so you're from Louisville. You basically lived here your whole life. Odd and end little extended trips out for a bit, but you've always lived here.
Yeah.
What about your family? You got a family? What's going on with that?
Yeah. So I have a wife and 3 kids now. Just had a baby boy about 2 months ago. My only boy.
Congratulations.
Yep. And then obviously 2 girls. And which is funny because I come from a family of two girls and a boy. Me, obviously, I'm the baby as well. So, yeah, a lot of similarities there, which is kind of weird because I always wanted a family like that, I guess, to kind of replicate. I like the dynamic, and, thought it'd be fun to, have that again. Yeah. So, yeah, we planned for this.
That's awesome. I'm excited for you. Was there any thought in naming your kid a junior? Your son?
Zero thought
whatsoever. Thought. Like if the idea was presented, would you just shoot like, no, I don't want to do that? Is there a reason for that?
Shooting that down.
I know technically a junior is supposed to be the first child and the first child who's a son.
Yeah.
But it's technically he's the first child that's a son. I don't know, but
I guess I'd have to be really proud of myself and all my accomplishments to just be like, yeah, like I'm so great, like I've got to name this kid after me, and he could just carry on that legacy, so everybody knows. No, but no, just I'm not a junior, I was the only boy in my family, and I've never even entertained that idea, and of course there's even more backstory to why and why we actually gave my son the name that he has currently. Which I guess we could get into that later.
Sure, yeah, I'm actually very intrigued. So
yeah, I'm surprised that we didn't talk about that before.
We'll leave you on the edge of your seat. Maybe come back to that in a little bit. So yeah, man, that's really cool. Now let me just ask you a weird question. One of the things we like to do, if there's something we don't know, we're honest about it. Mm-hmm. We're not sure. So, but we also, for the sake of fun, like to speculate wildly. In your opinion, when people are, you got a junior, you got a third, fourth, etc., at a certain point, you almost feel like you kind of have to keep the name going. But there's also there's going to be that weird margin there where you can say, look, no, I'm going to cut this off. We're going to change the name. And it's been long enough. We're going to change the name. Does that make sense?
I would hate to be the guy that has to make that decision.
Right. So if you're a junior, it could go either way with your kid. Yeah. Nowadays, you go to a junior, and that's probably about it. But if you're a third, I think if you're a third or even a fourth, you're right on that weird spot of, should I continue or should I not? But if you're like the seventh, Andrew the seventh or something, you're kind of like.
Does that become like a royal name at that point?
Maybe, I don't know. I would say there's a 90% chance that you probably should carry it on. Just like how far can this thing go? Like we're gonna break a record. It's gonna take us about 1,000 years, but we're gonna do it.
Right? Yeah. I don't even, and even that, I guess. You could get into some blue blood there. No.
Yeah, no, okay, but anyway, so it is. I don't know. I find that kind of an interesting idea there. So, so we've grown up childhood friends. About 3 years old, I think, is when like my mom started going to church, and you guys were already there, so we hung out a lot. That was really cool.
Yeah.
What do you have any interesting childhood memories, good, bad, or ugly? Did you?
I mean, I have several of all of the above. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to talk about like my most memorable, I don't know. You want to go traumatic or happy?
Why not make this a therapy session? Go ahead. I'm not licensed, but I can take a good guess. I've read a few books.
Okay. All right. So we're traumatic. Yeah. So. I was about 13 years old. Me and my dad, we went on a camping trip, and we rode dirt bikes. And we were like, I don't know, going into the boonies and just kind of like roughing it, staying in his van. In some hotels, and just like going to like these mountainous areas and. Yeah, we'd just ride all day. It was awesome. We both, he got me into dirt bikes, and yeah, so I mean, that was like something that we kind of bonded over. But anyways, one night on our trip, like I think we were actually looking for a hotel because it was going to get down into the 40s that night. So it was like, yeah, this doesn't seem like a good idea to stay in the van. We did have our sleeping bags. I mean, they weren't like top of the line anything, but they got the job done.
So let me make sure you guys were basically camping in the van.
Yes.
Was your plan there? Was this like an extended trip, like a week or longer? Or
this was over a weekend.
Days? Okay.
Yeah.
So a few days.
Yeah, it was like Friday and then come home Sunday, maybe ride a little bit, or maybe we could have been coming home on Monday. It's yeah. I don't know. It's been a while. But
that can help to give some context, understand what's going on.
Yep. And so, anyways, we're looking for a hotel in the town that we're going to ride at next, and can't find a hotel. So we're like, okay, well, we'll just stay in the van. We unpack the bikes, take them out of the back of the van, and we sleep at a campsite at the trailhead. I think it may have gotten down to 39 degrees that night. Wasn't really didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Then anyways, we kind of wake up the next morning. Like I'm kind of like coming to a little bit, and I see my dad get out of the van. I guess he's going to take a leak. And then next thing I know, I kind of hear like a thud against the van metal, and I'm just like, I don't know what that is. I kind of see his silhouette, against the back of the window, and like he's kind of like bobbing his head around, and I'm like, what is he doing? I'm kind of like giggling, like this is, I don't know.
Like your dad's being silly.
Yeah, I just didn't know what he was doing. I was like, what is he doing? I'm going to ask him when he gets in here. And so anyways, he walks around, like the van opens up the side van door, and he just kind of like flops down in there, like collapsing, into the back of the van, like kind of right above where, if my feet were towards the back of the van, my head was towards the front of the van, but I was more, I guess my most of my body was towards the back of the van. He would have just missed me when he collapsed in. And he's kind of like talking, and he's like, I can't really understand what he's saying, but he's just like, and I'm just like, I don't really know what to say. I'm like, Dad, why do you sound like the Godfather or something? And I'm like kind of laughing. I almost think it's funny, but I don't understand. And he kind of like gets it out that he's had a stroke.
Oh,
and yeah, and it was a massive stroke. Like it wasn't even, which is kind of crazy because he was in his early 40s at that point, and yeah, like I'm 13 years old. We have one cell phone on us at the time. It was a Nextel, which was it was a flip phone that also acted like a walkie-talkie. However,
right, yeah.
But we had zero service. For some reason. So basically it was up to me to get us to the ER, find a way to get to the ER, like and I don't know if like fight or flight obviously set in, and I did what I had to do. I loaded up the bikes in the van, and then he obviously couldn't drive, and like I said, I was 13, so I drove his van. I'd never driven anything in my life, but I drove his van down these small country roads and into this little small town. I remember, just pulling over. Finally, we had signal. I pulled over at this, post office annex or something, and yeah, I was able to call 911, and then they rushed there, and yeah.
Wow. So how long how long were you driving? Do you think it was a couple minutes, or was it a good bit of time? Or
I'd say it was about 15 minutes.
wow, man.
Yeah.
And so, like, in your mind, were you thinking just, I don't want to get in a wreck and I want to save my dad? Or was it, like, 13 years old behind the wheel of not just a car, but like a van, a bigger vehicle? Was there a little bit of that, hey, I'm driving?
It's weird. And I guess, again, the adrenaline, obviously we go into fight or flight. Mm-hmm. And I'm at this point in life, I'm going to say that mine is fight. Based on several other experiences.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. If you think that's kind of like played out over your life, if your response there is like that.
It's definitely more towards not yeah. I didn't shut down. It's almost like, I don't want to say like I knew what I had to do, but like I was ready and willing to do whatever, and I had urgency about it, and I just tried to, whatever was needed to be done, like, let's execute and do it. And I guess it didn't really hit me until like a little bit later that day. Yeah, I didn't realize until we got to the hospital, and they had told me if I hadn't acted and done that, then he would have died. Or at least he would have never made it back to even, 50% of himself.
Right, yeah, because with strokes, it can really permanently damage you.
Yeah.
Whether that is through mobility or cognitively. I think I've known people who have strokes. I'm pretty sure cognitively is the, more likely to be the case. I think it depends on where it's at in the brain. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm curious with that, obviously your family's glad that you acted. Mm-hmm. You're glad that you acted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when you, as a kid, now you're 13, you're a little bit older.
Yeah.
You're starting to get into that phase between boyhood and manhood,
Mm-hmm.
But realizing that because of your actions, you were able to do something so incredible, like save your dad's life and at least the way of life, that sort of thing. The kind of pressure that can put on, though, on you at a younger age is kind of intense. Not everyone receives it the same way.
Right.
Did you feel, not necessarily that there was pressure to perform, but did you feel pressure from that, like, moving forward?
No, I mean, yes and no. He was in the hospital for several. Well, I'm not, and actually not several days. He was in the hospital for 3 days. And the 3 days that he was in the hospital, I remember I was like, oh, I'm gonna go, cut grass to make us money. I remember like trying to go door to door. Yeah, it was, of course my parents kind of shut me down. They're like, you don't have to do that. Like, it's going to be fine.
But that is an interesting point, though. Your parents really did kind of help instill on that work ethic, and you're just going to constantly be working. And, again, I'm glad they said that you're in a position to where they said, you don't have to do that. You're 13 years old.
Right.
You don't got to pay the medical bills.
Yeah.
But that same, like, hey, I'm going to jump into it, mm-hmm. which also is interesting, it's that same response with the fight or flight kicked in. You're going to jump into acting upon it, but that's, it's not quite life or death in that moment of I'm going to go cut grass, but
right.
But there's still that same type of work ethic that I think, it seems like it was already to some degree in you by nature, but it was also nurtured pretty well in your family too.
Yeah, I mean, I was put to work at a pretty young age. My dad started taking me to work with him when I was about 3. So kind of like just for fun or company, but then obviously I really started getting more and more into work with him, and of course I used to resent him a bunch for that. Fast forward 25, 30 years, and yeah, I'm just like that. Yeah, I'm glad that he did make me do that.
Right.
I think there was definitely a different way he could have went about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to do something similar with my kids. Just kind of, it created a grit, and yeah, just even a mental toughness. And I think too, as well as, going through that experience and just a lot of different things, kind of like learning who I am as a person, and just being able to kind of push through things, has really helped me. And yeah, I think a lot of that did have to do with just some of the stuff that he put me through, whether it have been that traumatic experience or just making me go to work, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because, again, for being friends for so long and knowing each other for so long, we have a little bit of a history to draw on. But so we were talking, like, again, that work ethic, that I'm just going to kind of, just do what task that's in front of me that's needed. One thing is kind of interesting. For a little while, you moved in with me.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Florida for a while. You came to stay at my apartment. There's so many adventures there that are, it's interesting. But one of the things I was impressed with is, you came in, I was like, hey, look, I'll give you a place to stay for a while you were trying to figure out what you were going to do next. And, I think you actually came down twice. The first was for a short visit. Mm-hmm. The second time was for, I think, several weeks or maybe a month or two.
Yep.
Forget the exact length. But at that point, it was like, okay, to add extra stuff, backstory, we're not going to have to get into that today. But my brother and his new wife was also living with me. Uh-huh. And we're like, look, if you're staying for a week, that's one thing. You're visiting, and beyond that, you're staying with us, and you need to help kind of contribute. And so you were like, hey, you didn't have a job, so you just went to day labor and started working hard. I was impressed.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that really got me, and I will probably always keep this memory. It's Florida. It's in the summer. It's hot. I have basically a glorified window unit. And that thing, it was like a loft apartment, so upstairs had nothing.
Yeah.
Downstairs, you wanted to be in the kitchen or the living room that was just past that, so that you can get the airflow. The apartment was cheap, and the airflow matched the price that I paid for the apartment.
Yes. Yeah.
But I had it set higher, like 75 or closer to 80, because I did not want to pay for electricity to run the thing at 65 degrees.
Right. Which makes sense.
I think my brother was like, "Can you make it colder?" I was like, "Listen, if you want to put money on the table and say, hey, I'll pitch in more for electric this month,"
right.
Then he's like, "Oh no, I can't do that." And so you just got up, immediately went over, pushed that sucker down to like 65 degrees, and was like, "I'll pay you tomorrow." I'm like, "I know you'll do it."
Yeah, that's some things have never changed because I'm still like that. I need minimum 66 degrees in my house for me to sleep.
So let's back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So I mentioned, Florida, you came there, and again, you've got your, kind of that good attitude of you're gonna like kind of put your head down if you need to, but you're gonna take care of whatever task is in front of you. Mm-hmm. Fight or flight. You've got the fight. It seems like going on. You're gonna push forward. So what landed you in Florida? What was going on in your life before that? Because again, you were here trying to figure out what was going on in life. I know you were trying a couple different things. Master's Commission was one thing in particular. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Master's Commission, and then maybe what brought you to it, and then what happened to make you leave?
What even got me to go to Master's?
Well, let's start back a little bit. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
So a lot of people have no idea what this is.
Yeah. So Master's Commission, essentially, in their words, is a discipleship program that's basically I think they said that you were tithing in a form because you didn't have money, so you were tithing your time, but you were also had the ability to get some college credits and learn some theology. Basically, it was like a college, but a discipleship college.
And for anyone who's not familiar, the idea of like discipleship, that's very, it's not just Christian, it's religious terminology.
Sure. In this case, Christian.
Yeah, specifically Christian.
For Christian, yeah.
Right. And so, with discipleship, it's not just about what you say you believe, it's about how you're acting it out, and you are discipline and discipleship are linked together. Mm-hmm. You're disciplining yourself into becoming more of what your goal or your ideal is. And so, again, this one was within Christianity. And then you mentioned tithing as well. Again, everyone may not be too familiar. The idea of tithing, in the Bible we have where the Israelites were commanded to give 1/10 of everything that they earned. The idea is, I have not earned this by my own hand. Yes, I've done the work and everything. I've disciplined myself. I'm harvesting. I'm doing whatever the deal is. I've put my own blood, sweat, and tears into whatever my job is, and I've gained something. But I also have this understanding that God's the one who blessed it. Mm-hmm. So, you could say, for example, when we go to the grocery store, within Christianity, you're supposed to. It's typical to pray over your meal to give a thanksgiving or a blessing. And when we're here, we go to the grocery store, you're in a big city. It's one thing to say, okay, yeah, it's nice. We can afford it. We just go to Walmart, Kroger, wherever, and buy the stuff. Yeah. But when you're growing your own food, you're out, you're working the land. Yeah. You know that if you ever done any kind of a garden or your homestead, that there's no guarantee that what you plant's going to work, it's going to grow, and if it grows, it's not even going to be devoured by something else. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the concept, the purpose is that you're giving of yourself, of what you've gained, because you recognize that it's by God's provision. And so that's kind of the idea of tithing. And so typically that's for money, but you were saying that their idea of discipleship and tithing was you don't have money.
It was it was basically it was for the whole span of your life. You're going to tithe 1% of your life, and they broke it down into some math. I don't know. We're kids and they're older than us, and they know. But a little backstory to even before I decided to go there. Basically, I was going to a youth group at a church, and I was the drummer for the youth group. I was a youth leader, quote unquote, I guess. I'm not really sure if I was actually looked at as a youth leader, but they kind of told me that I was, so I guess I was. I don't know.
So still a student, like a high school student who's kind of in a leadership role, or is this after you graduated?
No, I had already graduated.
Okay, gotcha,
I had a full-time job, all those things. Yeah, I think I was 18 going on 19, or maybe I was 19 going on 20. I'm not sure. Actually, yeah, I think yes, I was 20 years old basically when this program had come through, and they do this ministry where they'll travel from all these different churches, and they'll do skits and I don't know, they'll play some music, and then the leader of the group, who's also a pastor, he'll preach word kind of targeted towards the young kids, and then they'll essentially try to recruit them into their program to build up these young disciples, and give them these life lessons, and teach them how to be followers of Christ. And so at that point in my life, when they actually showed up at this church I was playing drums for, I was by no means living a Christian lifestyle. I was partying, I was living with a girl, just really in a bad spot in a lot of different ways. The people that I hung out with, living a basically not what you would see as this is a Christian leader, youth leader. This isn't
right. You definitely were not a good example of what
not really walking
Christ follower or Christian would be like. Okay,
correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so. Anyways, they come in through the town, and I'm just playing drums there because I like to play drums, and that's really the only reason I would go. My parents had kind of instilled in me you go to church, that's what you got to do, and so I guess I would go for that. And I kind of knew there was, it was good for me in a sense, but also I was kind of on the brink of just not believing in it at all.
Right. Your actions certainly didn't look like it, but even beyond that, in your mind and your heart, you were just kind of not even really sure about this anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, I had me and a buddy of mine, we had decided we were going to get an apartment together, and we'd been looking and everything like that. And then obviously Masters came into town. They're recruiting, and I remember I had a buddy of mine named Chad. He was technically still in the youth group, and again, I was his leader, but we were friends and we were buds, and low key on the side, we would hang out and we would smoke weed together.
Okay.
So
again, great leadership.
Great leadership. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyway, of course, it wasn't I persuaded him or anything. Hey kid, come to this dark alley. Let's do some drugs.
Right.
But it was just we became friends, and then he was kind of opened up to me. I opened up to him, and then there was a friendship made out of it. But it was not very profitable in a lot of ways in that sense. But anyways, so Masters comes in and he decides he's gonna go. Of course, some of it there were some cute girls, and they had talked him into it, and he's like, "Yeah, man, come on, you gotta go, And I was like, "Yeah, I might go. I was like, I don't know though, but maybe, And then so anyways, I go and I look at this apartment. And I like it. And me and my buddy were talking about, like, yeah, we can do this, man. We can just keep this lifestyle that we got going on. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just not even going to do that Masters thing.
Yeah, so you had the opportunity. You certainly weren't living the life. It would have been a major change for you, as I understand it. Because not only was it just, oh, here's the rules you can't follow, it would have been a much more close-knit community. And you couldn't have gotten away with it if you wanted to. Correct. For the most part, at least. I mean, you can always find some way to get away, but, like, it would have been a significant shift for you to do this. Yeah. And then disciplining yourself in something that you're not even sure you believe anymore. Mm-hmm. That's a big step to take.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, or you can live the comfortable life, having your fun, in the immediate, moving in with a friend, as opposed to going with people that you don't even know.
Yeah.
So that was a really, did I stage that up correctly about where you're at this point? Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
make sure I got that.
Mentally for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, don't go, stay home, party, have fun, live your life. Like, I'm having too much fun. And I think actually that girl that I lived with, like, ended up breaking up with her. She was kind of bad news for me, and and then I was like kind of having my fun and being single and mingling. That there was just really no motivation to like step into this faith that I kind of borderline on anyways, and I was like, I don't even know if I believe this too much anymore.
It was certainly inconvenient for you to believe.
Yeah, but I remember, and also too, just to add a little bit to what Masters was, they'd kind of give you a description of what the rules were while you were there as a first year. So basically, this is like like I said, it's like a college program type situation, and I think at the end of it you're supposed to get a job in a church doing something, like, I think,
so it's almost kind of like a Christian religious version of a technical or trade school.
Correct.
You're not going to get, it's not like you're getting pre-med or anything, and
right.
You're going to go, but you would basically have gone through all the requirements and information, everything they need you to know. They know that they can test you, they know you, that you know what you're doing, they can put you in a church position, pastor, teacher, whatever it is.
Yeah, inevitably it ends up being like this internship type situation at some church, and you get to do some job that you want to do. Anyways, parameters of the first year were you can't have a job, you can't have a girlfriend, no romance whatsoever.
What about bromance?
Yeah, I mean, that depends.
I'm sure they not bromance, but like I'm sure they encouraged good friendships.
I mean, and. Yeah. Did I mention you couldn't have a job?
No job, no girl, no relationships like that.
Yeah. And then second year, you could do, basically you could do that. You could have a job, you could have a girlfriend, yada, because you were now matured in your faith.
Okay. And when they were going to different places, and they were essentially recruiting people, or say, hey, if this is interesting to you, you can come to. And when I say recruiting, some people, their mind is like, oh, you're just going around trying to recruit people into your thing, and but is that any different from recruiting somebody to go to your college, your university?
No, I mean it's very similar.
But I guess I'm curious. I know that there's other groups who do this. They know that when they're going around and when they're sharing their message, they're doing their thing, and when they're asking people to come join them, they know that you're going to get a mixed bag, but especially you're going to get people who might have been in your situation. There are people who are in, or even in rougher situations. They're not picking the cream of the crop. Like, this kid went to Christian school. He like aced his Bible classes. He's got the comb over, the full 3-piece suit on Sunday.
Yeah,
like, they weren't really trying to go for that type of person.
They were actually, and come to find out later, and I didn't realize this, but they were actually kind of going for more of the guys who were falling off and kind of starting to choose their own path and think that they had it all figured out and they didn't need church or they didn't need this faith. And so actually that I was their target. I was the guy exactly who they wanted. Apparently my buddy Chad was also that guy, and they knew about it. And it's funny, when you're a kid, you think you're nobody knows what you're doing or what you're up to, as far as like adults. You're like, they're stupid and they're oblivious. They don't know anything. And of course, as we got older, we figured it, we know more than what a kid is letting on to. And
right.
Same with them. Obviously, they knew exactly what I was up to and what I had been doing. I had been targeted at that point, and rightfully so, because I met all of those parameters, I guess.
All right, so now we have a decent idea of Master's Commission. There's this almost like a vocational type of ministry training that ultimately they want to put you in a church, but they're also not trying to get, the cream of the crop, the top tiered, Christian example of a Christian. But it seems like, and maybe not necessarily, it seems like they would take anybody, but they're not trying to necessarily get the worst person who's never even heard Jesus' name either. Somebody who's grown up in church. It seems like their ideal person would be, you grew up in church, you're familiar with everything, but you're not really committed, or you're kind of falling away. So you kind of have a basic kind of a foundation, even if it's a bad one.
Yeah.
That's who they're wanting to take in, and kind of help mold them into somebody who is much more strong in their faith. And whether or not practice, puts it there, that at least seems to be the ideal goal, or may not be their exact mission statement, but that seems to be what they're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you think it's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is.
If anyone's listening who is much more familiar with Master's Commission, you've actually ran that, you've gone through it, let me know. chartinglifepodcast@gmail.com, and we'd love to have you on and talk about some of this stuff. So anyways, after that little plug into the show and how to communicate with us, so we have an idea what Master's Commission is, what your situation was that drew you in there. What was life like when you were there, and then ultimately kind of what did your exit look like, or what kind of led to that?
Well, let me start with what even got me to go, because I was not going to go.
You said you weren't going to go.
Yeah, I was not going to go. I was actually, like I said, me and my buddy had looked at this apartment. We were going to get it. I was actually on my way to this apartment to sign a lease and get it going. And all of a sudden, I just kind of I just had this feeling, and almost, I guess, like a very loud thought, we'll put it like that if I were to sign that lease, it was going to be the biggest mistake of my life. And I remember it was very weird for me, because I realized later that actually that was the Holy Spirit speaking to me.
Right. So let me ask you real quick. Had you had, maybe not to that degree, but have you had previous experiences like that before? Or was that, pretty unique to you at that point?
Yeah, I think at that point it was. I think there was some instances when I was in 7th grade where I had these spiritual, I don't know, encounters. In certain parts of my teen years, I had these spiritual encounters, but it wasn't anything it was enough to make me try to live out that lifestyle. But then, it's kind of like day-to-day grind and people you hang out with and everything like that. And you just kind of forget about it and lose touch. And then after a while, of not really practicing it, or, you just kind of, maybe it was all fake. Maybe none of that was real. Maybe it was all in my head.
The daily grind really does kind of test your resolve, your commitment. When you're in fight or flight mode, it's one thing. Your adrenaline's pumping, you're going, and you're making your decisions. And in some ways, that is, I don't want to say it's easier per se. Everybody's experience is going to be different there, but it's almost like, hey, I have this moment that I have to make a decision. But when it's the daily stuff, it's these little decisions over and over, and we feel like we can afford to fail here and there.
Yeah.
And which is kind of true.
Yeah.
But things do add up. But but then ultimately, like I said, kind of maybe going back to when you had this moment, this is gonna be the worst decision you're gonna make.
Yeah.
It's not that this is the first time you have ever had any experience, but it certainly wasn't. It was certainly different from what you've had before. More intense.
Well,
clear.
Especially for where I was, because again, I'm on the brink of disbelief, and then all of a sudden, this, again, not audible. It's not, this
Andrew,
is the biggest mistake you'll ever make, like that. It's just more of a feeling, conscience. I don't know. I really don't know how to describe hearing something that is external but also internal,
Right.
From you. You know that it's not your thought. Like,
Right.
I'm in my mind, this is not going to be. There's no doubt this is the best decision I'm about to make ever. I'm getting ready to have the ultimate bachelor lifestyle. I was getting ready to be great, and then I get this, and I'm. What to do with that. Of course, I knew what to do with it. I turned around. And I went home and I signed up for master's commission. And that was really, I would say, at least in my adulthood, my first encounter with God. In a matured state of mind, in a kind of somewhat educated, which I was still young and dumb, but kind of having a little more understanding aside from being like 12 to 14 years old and youth group and all that, making my own decisions type situation.
Right. It's kind of the way I kind of describe I guess you could say salvation. When you grow up in church, depending on the church you go to, especially like in most Protestant churches, it's like, oh, hey, I went to the altar and I got saved like 45 times when I was a kid.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You get baptized a bunch.
Yeah. But regardless, so it's when you grew up in church, and especially when it is your faith is more confessional. And it's very interesting to me, but it's another topic for another show, is like how some churches do things differently. If you're Catholic, you're baptized typically when you're a baby or when you first come in, things like that. But if you're a more confessional church, that your salvation is on your profession of you profess Christ, it might be hard to pinpoint exactly when you got saved if grew up in church, and you kind of make that commitment. But for me, the way I've described it, and what you're saying kind of reminds me a bit, is I can't tell you the first time I ever prayed and said, Jesus, come into my heart, but I can tell you the time when my faith became my own. Yes. It wasn't my parents' faith. It was my faith.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because my parents believed. I assessed whatever information I needed to, and I made that personal commitment. Anyways, it sounds a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, basically that sounds like I said, there were instances in 7th grade that I had, certain leaders that had a profound impact on my life, and there were some spiritual things there, but again, there was a lack of understanding within me and just not knowing what to do with, what it was, and then, how much of it was a bias, just, being young and impressionable. This time it was kind of like I'm out on my own. I have my own way of thinking. This is how I do things, and then, boom, wake up call. Here it is.
Yeah. And you answered.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm glad I did. I'm glad that, there was kind of like that imprint, and just, so anyways, turned around, went home, told my buddy, I was like, yeah, I think I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go to Florida. Which is where the Master's Commission was.
Was that in Orlando?
It was in Orlando.
Okay.
It was at a church called Faith World.
I know a guy who at least at one point was connected to that.
The next step in that whole thing was we go down and we look at the campus, if you will, and check it out and kind of spend the weekend there and feel it out and see if it's definitely something we want to do. And then at that point, I think tuition was $5,000 for the year, which it doesn't sound that bad, in comparison to other colleges. Granted, the college credit you get for this is, it's not
accredited for a university.
Yeah, you're not gonna go out of there and be able to get a diploma.
But if you're gonna end up in a church, for the people who go through it, everything. Yeah, that's good enough. Just like a vocational thing.
Yeah, I think it's basically it leads to the next step type situation, and I think then that gets accredited, and it just. A short. No,
but the point is, it's still education. You got a year for $5,000.
Yeah,
which is pretty reasonable when it comes to higher education.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, especially if it includes room and board and everything, and you're in Florida.
Yeah.
But anyways, So you go down, check out the campus. Did you like it?
Yeah, I thought it was a blast. I mean, we were in Florida. It was in Orlando. I think we went to Universal, we didn't go to Universal. We went to the boardwalk or something like that, which is outside of Universal. Anyways, it was a great time. I've always loved Florida, and then I was down there with no parents for the first time, so that was cool.
Yeah, if only your bachelor living days could have
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh man. So this would have been what, 2008, 2009, somewhere
This
in that
was
ballpark.
2009. Yeah, this
Okay.
was about June. Actually, is when we went down.
Really?
June 2009 or May 2009.
Is that when
something
you
like
moved, or is that just
No,
when
no,
you
no.
checked out?
We just that's when we went to
Okay.
check it out. Had a blast. Loved all the people. Loved the energy. All that good stuff. I was like, "Yep, I'm sold. Let's do it. I'm gonna sign up." I think it was September is when it started. So get down there and yeah, kind of like reunion with I can't. I guess I can't really say reunion. Yeah, it was a reunion because I made friends with all these people, and we had like heart to hearts, I guess, in a way while we were down there for the weekend.
You make the connections, especially if you guys are similar. You're gonna be different situations, different experiences, especially since you're kind of coming from all over the place. You're coming from Kentucky down to Florida, but you're having people who have had similar experiences. Isn't quite the right word, but you're in a similar situation.
Similar walks.
There you go.
And then of course the second years and the third years, they're it's the same thing. They're like, yeah, this is where I was in my life, and then Masters came in, I made the step, and and here I am, and it's great, and I couldn't be closer to God, and it was so and it's funny because I didn't, even though I had received that message to go, I didn't stop living the way I was living.
Right.
I just kept going, basically with a countdown to this was D-Day. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna change my life there.
Right, you're gonna have his, run the clock down.
Yeah,
it's like it's gonna change anyways. Might as well.
Just get it all out of my system. All of that stuff.
And that's an interesting topic. We don't have time in this show, this episode, but that might be something, at least an idea to explore.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit, the pros and cons. Like the Amish have like Rumspringer or something, where you go out, you test the world.
Yeah.
Maybe get out some of your vices, and then you come live. Oh, then you choose, from there. Right. And that might be kind of harsh, but in our, growing up the church we did, it's not like as strong holiness as Aaron grew up in, but the idea of being holy is an aspect of Pentecostal theology. Mm-hmm. And so, the growing up, it's almost like the instinct that we might have had is, don't do that. Don't try to get it all out. Just stop. Right. So you stop it. Even if you have to like work yourself down a bit, try to stop. And granted, in wisdom would say, don't run the clock out like you were trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 19, 20 years old. That's But I would be curious how other people would view that. Would they say, yeah, you know what, that's a great idea. And here's why. But I know like our instinct would be probably more of saying that's not a good idea.
I would not condone doing it.
Right.
And there's reasons for that. That of course I come to experience later in my life. At first, like, everything was great. I mean, we would do, I remember the hardest part of it being is we would have these tests at the end of the week, and it was memorizing scripture, and they would increase the amount of scriptures we would do each week.
Okay.
So I think it started with 5, and then 10, 20, and then, I think, by the end of the year, it's, you're in the hundreds, like 150 or something like that. I don't know.
That you have to memorize in a week, or you have accumulated.
You've accumulated. Now you basically know. Yeah.
I was thinking you had 7 days to memorize 150.
No, that would be
like, okay, like
you'd be like, wow, they really put you through.
You'd have to read entire passages at that point instead of unique verses. But okay, so they kind of run you through the gauntlet. And that probably tests you. That probably. The people who are not committed are probably going to fall away from that point. Like, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Any idea what the success rate was? That did you have a lot of people drop out first year or
no? Actually, well, yes, but that's late. That's down the road. Later on. This was I guess a fluke of a year for Master's Commission, at least. From my understanding, a lot of crazy, wacky things went on in the year that I was there.
Yeah.
Which it's even crazy to think about all that happened the way that it did. But, so I mean, we'd be learning all these scriptures, and then doing like volunteer services and like Big Brother programs, and then we'd clean the church, or we would the church that I was at was a really big church. Just to kind of give it like some perspective, it was Benny Hinn's church.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and then I don't know if we name drop on this or not. Well, I already said it was Faith World.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, you do what you want.
Yeah, Clint Brown was the pastor
Okay.
at that time, and he was a pretty big name in gospel music, especially at that time. Dwight Howard, the center at the time for the Magics, went to that church.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that's a basketball player. I think
Yeah.
I was gonna make a joke there, but that really was him.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, I remember like I was a grip on the. A grip is a. I think this is what a grip is a guy who holds a wire for a cameraman. At least in my definition, that's what it was, because that's what I was doing.
So they don't trip over it, or
yeah, basically there's
Yeah.
he's running all around the stage with a handheld camera, and it was a giant camera.
Right.
Okay. This was 2009, so technology was a little different then. I think now it would just be on a camera phone maybe, or a really compact like HD type camera. I don't know. Anyways, I don't know. But anyways, I remember at one point, like I'm holding this grip, or I'm holding this wire, and I'm following the guy, and there is this metal thing called a truss that has like these stage lights on it, and it's really low to the ground actually. And I'm like following him, and I smack my head right into it.
Man.
Everyone sees it. Like, I mean, I was just,
and this is during like a live church service?
Yeah, this is,
Okay.
and this is being recorded. This is something people are watching on TV. Like, it was right there playing it was pretty embarrassing for me.
Yeah.
But,
So I know you're behind the camera, but do you know if that was caught on camera?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Granted, I don't think that it was in the shot that they had on the TV. At
Right,
that point.
right. But I'm just saying that would be an interesting footage to
Yeah, I mean,
to see at this point. But
in the control room,
Yeah.
they got a pretty good laugh of it, and they poke fun at me.
You
for
were
a little
okay.
bit.
Didn't get.
I mean,
yeah.
it rung my bell, but I got up and I was like, that was embarrassing. I got to pretend like nothing happened.
Show must go on.
Yeah, and I think even too, there was like a time where the camera guy's going down the aisle, and like I'm just sitting there, I don't even know what to do, and I just like I kind of crawl across the ground, like down the center of the pews and down the aisle, and I remember again caught on camera. And they're just like, they again poking fun at me. They're like, maybe don't do that next time. Like, all I see is like, we go to camera 2, and there you are, just Spidey crawling across the ground. And I was just like, great. Like, this is like, this is not a good first time doing that. Like, I really am not into this anymore.
They did not train you.
They did not train. Yeah.
I would say like I love photography, and at one point I thought that was gonna be one of my career paths.
Yeah.
But I realized that like you have to have no regard for people's personal space, or for the flow of anything if you're going to be a photographer. Like you have to just get right up in their face, or you have to like just walk right through the crowd like it's no big deal. And when I'm if I'm at an event or something, in my mind I'm thinking of the production of it in general. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is probably going to look this way, the camera's going to be here, the audience is going to see this thing or listening to this other spot over here, and so there's where their attention's going to be. And so I think of it maybe in those terms. So I'm like, I don't want to interrupt that, which is why I would not be good as a photographer. But I love watching photographers do the things I'd be nervous to do.
Oh yeah,
they're bold. They don't care. They're sneaking out from like behind like fake plants or whatever. Or they're just crawling under chairs if they have to.
You've got to essentially feel like you're a ghost of some form because of how intrusive you are in just somebody's personal space. And you're in their bubble and just and it's I don't know. It wasn't really for me in that sense. I mean, obviously photography be a little bit different, but even then, like even being the grip guy, or if I became the guy who held the camera, like I would hate doing that. I just wouldn't feel comfortable with it. But yeah, it didn't gel with that. Immediately hated it. But yeah, anyway, so as far as Master Commission goes, it was a good program starting out. I had a pretty good teacher. He was very intellectual. His name was Bobby. They called him P-Bob.
Okay.
That was an interesting name. I thought it seemed silly to me. I don't know. Or P-Bobby, you know, there's another one.
Let me ask you a little bit. So how long, how many years in Masters were you?
I was 1 year in.
1 year in, okay.
Yeah.
And then did you quit like before the next year started, or
I quit before the end of the year.
So you didn't quite make it.
I was actually out by February.
Okay, so from was it June or July?
September.
I
didn't make it very long.
So you made it the equivalent of just a little over a college semester.
Yeah.
So what drove you to that point? What kind of led up to your decision to quit?
Well,
and why did you quit?
Yeah, so this is where things kind of got messy. Everything was gelling and pretty cool over at Faith World, and then all of a sudden, you know, word came down that Pastor Bobby was going to get fired.
Oh, okay.
We have no idea why. It didn't make any sense. He's doing a good job with the program. Everybody loves him. And so, yeah, I remember Pastor Bobby comes in one day. He's in tears, and he's like, I'm moving to a different, you know, master's commission. I'm not going to be your leader anymore.
And they have, just for clarity, there was multiple master's commissions. They had them
across
the U.S.
Apparently, they're nationwide. Different churches adopt the program. You know, whether it be like, you know, they're trying to get some type of I don't know, help in just, you know, kind of like day laborers or just people kind of, you know, but then they're also teaching them. Like, it's kind of like a give and take in that sense.
Right. That makes sense. Especially when you're an adult too, you can kind of consent to
and then, you know, they're almost like apprentices of the ministry in that sense, and they're coming up and they're going to, eventually they're going to work for that church. So anyways, so he gets canned, and it's a big ordeal. Like, it becomes chaos immediately. Like, people are really upset. They're crying, you know, the people that had known him longer. Like, I was upset, you know, but I didn't know him that long. There's guys who have been there, you know, all 4 years with him, and and you know, people are walking off the premise, you know, they're like, we're not coming back, we're moving, we're going home, you know. And I remember one day we come in, and there's, you know, I think we started out with like 20 something people, you know, in total all 4 years. And then it came down to just, I don't know, there was like 8 people that showed up.
Wow.
And I remember the pastor of the church, who we had never like talked to in person before, came down and had a conversation with us, you know, because like this guy was essentially like a celebrity. So that was, I remember thinking like, whoa, this is big time. Like, he's going to talk to us.
Yeah, it's big enough church for one, but you're not talking to him yet in the like 6-7 months that you've been engaged with this, and he's, I guess, is he trying to?
Well, I hadn't even been in it that long, actually. I'm sorry. This had only been, it only went on for about a month before all this happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was very quick. Granted, we were with each other every day, so there's quite a bonding. You know, I mean,
kind of an expedited friendship relationship. You bond.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you go to camp and for like a week, and you're with these people, and like you have this, you know, this sacred bond with each other that, you know, you didn't have with anybody else. And I mean, you've been through camp, you know what that's like. Yeah, so it was kind of like that. It's just, we've been there for a month, maybe it was like a month and a half.
Right.
And anyway, so he comes down, he's like, we're gonna have more unity, you know, with 8 people than we will out of, you know, the whole group. And
okay,
you know,
so he's trying to spin it.
Yeah,
and that's fair. I mean, any person in that position would be trying to spin that in the best way they can.
Sure. Yeah. So
it's
like,
not technically wrong. Either. So he's trying to help kind of smooth things over a bit and kind of retain the people that he's got left over. Is that fair?
Yeah, and what I took from it is essentially it was a financial decision, because financially, they just couldn't cut it. They had to get rid of him. You know, it was nothing against him. It was just more financial.
They should have charged you guys $6,000.
They should have charged us $6,000. Yep. Oh well. And then he leaves, and the youth pastor of the church ends up taking over as the leadership. And it wasn't very good. I mean, it was kind of like, you know, he didn't really talk or teach us or anything. It was just kind of like, we went to a basketball game once and watched a game, and then we worked a concession at that basketball game, and then, or a different basketball game. And then all of a sudden it was, we're shutting down, guys.
Man, okay, so they shut it down. You didn't just leave.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
All right, well, let's try to let's see if we can get to there. So tell me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways, go to. I moved to North Carolina because that's where Pastor Bobby went.
Okay, so you follow that pastor.
I follow him there. We go, and I'm there now from. I stay there from October till February, and I remember when I went there, it was kind of like, developing my relationship with God. It took a different turn. Like, it was like I went to the next level, I guess.
Okay.
New place, new me, reinvented in a sense.
Yeah, there's depth to it, new layer. That's
I
cliche versus cliche.
Yeah.
We go on,
this is who I was in this town. I can now be who I was trying to be in this town type situation. And I go there, and there's a lot of growth. I remember fasting a lot. And just and it was rough there. Actually, I remember they would give us $10 to live on for food every 2 weeks.
Oh, did you have food beyond that, or were you supposed to supply? Like it was like $10 supplements, whatever.
It was. We would work at this daycare, and our pay was $10 per person. Again for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of food.
$1 a day.
Essentially, yes.
Basically, so lots of ramen. Did you get people try to, did you go on TV and see if we could sponsor a child?
Yeah, it was essentially like that. It was they wanted us to write letters, to anybody and everybody that we knew.
Okay, and really try to fundraise yourself.
Yeah, needless to say, there were some weeks we actually didn't work at that daycare, and so it was just, and I remember my parents really didn't have the money, and I just went without. And it was very, and that's when I really leaned into my faith at that point in my relationship with God, and really started to develop that and have that strong connection. Just a totally different universe was opened up to me, I guess. This is then where this takes. I started to notice little things here and there of corruption, and just kind of, there was a lot of corruption kind of going on that wasn't really plain to see, and God started to open my eyes towards those things. Some manipulation going on, and just the overall leadership. And Pastor Bobby, he wasn't a part of that. He actually wasn't the leader of this Master's Commission. He was going to take over later.
Okay, so he was there, I guess, working to some degree, and was kind of moving up whatever positions or ranks was available to him at the time. To get the position that he had previously. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. But you notice that this particular Master's North Carolina.
This leadership was they weren't really good news. And I remember at some point, like, God spoke to me, and I remember him just saying it's time to leave, and I'm just like,
was this similar to the voice you heard back in Kentucky?
Yeah. Saying... And at this point, like, it was, I knew I had been hearing from God a lot. There's a lot of, I got a journal of just a lot of things that were spoken to me at this point. So I'm very familiar at this point with what this is. Yeah,
you're much more tuned into it. Maybe the extra noises, so to speak, have been dialed down.
I've dialed into that frequency. I can I'm on that frequency now. I can hear. I'm basically, if I'm feeling it in this certain way, I know exactly what that is, and that's the Holy Spirit speaking to me and giving me some form of guidance.
Gotcha.
And so again, in this case, it's time to go. So I don't understand. I'm confused. I'm like, why would you send me here if you want me to leave? This doesn't make any sense. Like, I thought the whole
pretty quick turnaround time.
Yeah, especially in I wasn't there for very long. Didn't even complete 1 year. It seemed very backwards in a sense. I was like, that's not God. I'm definitely there's some calibrations that are needed here. But I remember going into a service that night in which the deacon of the church was preaching. I remember he was like, this is, actually, I should say the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, listen up, because I'm sitting here.
So, pay attention to, you're trying to focus inwardly on his voice.
I'm over here just still confused, and he's just, listen up. And I'm like, okay. And I did that. I remember the deacon goes, this message is from the Holy Spirit. I got this from the Holy Spirit directly. And so I'm like, this isn't, you got my attention.
It's one of those things where, again, it's your attention, and I would say just from wisdom, if someone dares to speak on behalf of God, not just I've done study of Scripture, I believe this is the case, or the Scripture clearly says this. We go back down that road, but the point is, like, I've studied Scripture and I've discovered the truth here.
Yeah.
There's one thing, and it's another thing to say, "Thus saith the Lord."
Yeah.
I'm declaring on behalf of God something to be true. Your ears should go up and be skeptical, I would say, because this is, and I'm sure you're going to get into this, but like, is this true or not?
Yeah. Because I mean, in order to make a statement like that, there's
no middle ground on that one. It's either accept it or condemn it.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's really where you're at that point.
Authority or psychotic, like there's, it's one of those. So, anyways, the message was get out of the boat, and the whole message was Peter getting out of the boat and going to meet with Jesus and walk on water during the storm. He'd mentioned that the waves were contrary to them, and it was frightening, and the whole group of disciples said, no, it's a ghost, it's this, it's that, don't get out of the boat, that's not the right thing to do, don't do it. And Jesus said, keep your eyes on me, and walk towards me and get out of the boat. And he got out of the boat, and he walked on the water with Jesus during a storm. It couldn't have been any more clear at that point. Yeah. I was like, just how this has happened. Like, okay, God, I believe you now. I understand. I don't understand, but I understand you definitely want me to leave.
Yeah. And I'm going to trust you. And it seems like that was your response. Okay.
Yeah. And, so anyways, and I remember even then, like, there started to get some opposition towards me. I don't even know why. It was a whole weird, I mean, that could be a whole nother podcast for another day. Yeah. But anyway, so ended up leaving that way. And, I remember telling them I'm leaving, and, they weren't very happy about it. Yeah. They tried to convince me, and I was like, I got to go.
Yeah, so you were saving them about $1 a day when you left, right?
I was at that point, point,
probably. But okay, so there was some resistance, not just resistance, but you said some people there were some instances, previous conversations we've had that it was just you kind of had a bit of a target on your back. Mm-hmm. You believed it was your time to leave. It seemed like it was right, but you were confident that was God telling you what to do. You trusted the voice, and you did. Yeah. How did that? Was it the pastor Brian? Brian, am I getting that right?
Bobby.
I knew it was B. Gee,
P-Bob.
How did you talk to him?
I talked to him.
Like with him?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't happy. He was just like, he thought maybe I was getting some outside influence.
Okay.
And I mean, he wasn't wrong. I was getting some outside influence in a sense. Mm-hmm. I'd met a guy and had a relationship with a guy. Who was I guess he would call he was self-proclaimed prophet.
Okay. Always gotta be cautious with those.
Right. And of course he didn't come right out and tell me that he was a prophet. It was more or less, I remember where there would be like these meetings with the guys, like we'd just kind of be hanging out, and then all of a sudden somehow he would get turned to talking about God. Mm-hmm. And I remember just some of the things that he would say were just, I mean, it was kind of beyond me how he got this information, and I remember him talking about, hey, you want to be successful and you want to have the big this and the, a nice lighting package. Of course, he's speaking for the church. You want to have all the fundraising, yada, yada. He's like, what you need to do is you need to want to know God, essentially. I mean, he said it a little more poetically, and articulately, but basically he was saying, keep your eyes on God and focus on God, love God, and go after God with all of your heart, and then all these things will come.
Okay.
Which it's funny to even thinking about it that way. If you do that, now your mission no longer becomes those things. Your mission just becomes to please God.
Right.
And then God starts to give you things, and then you don't really care for them or want them, which is great, but you can still use them as a tool.
So you did have some outside influence. You told Pastor Bobby, you're heading out, but did he kind of give you a blessing, or is it just kind of like, that sucks, get out of here? Or
yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird. I was like, I'm gonna still pay the money, but I just gotta go. And he's like, all right, fine.
Okay. Yeah. So you leave there, and then what happens next?